Добрий день, я вітаю всіх, хто приєднався до нас.
Welcome everybody. The Ukrainian media center, the Ukrinform outlet, begins its press conference. We are into the 142nd day of the heroic resistance of the Ukrainian people. Let me introduce to you our speaker, Kremin, is the State Language Protection Commissioner. Today we'll concentrate on what will be affected as of tomorrow, the law of Ukraine on language. Will you tell us what changes this legislation will bring and who will be facing administrative sanctions and responsibility? Glory to Ukraine. First of all, I would like to emphasize that since the 24th of February, Ukraine has been massively attacked by the Russian Federation. Ukrainian nationhood, Ukrainian nation, everything that is Ukrainian is under the threat of being demolished. All the airstrikes that we have seen this week only, all the death toll, makes me think about Vinnytsia and Kharkiv and the latest strikes on my native Mykolaiv, where the educational establishments were targeted, including two major universities with all the infrastructure. They have been and will be used as educational facilities after the war. This is a major blow on the humanitarian framework of my country. I pay my respect to everybody with an emphasis on the fact that the Ukrainian language takes on a special meaning today. It's a front in itself because of the fact that the language law and the decision by the Constitutional Court of Ukraine, which was yesterday, saw its anniversary. Due to this decision, the law on the provision of the functioning of the Ukrainian language as a state language, the Russian fifth column is trying to make pseudo-sensation on every article of the law. Since we began to mount our campaign either in the sphere of culture or at the exam level, when the high officials or those seeking to receive Ukrainian citizenship, we saw a wave of manipulative messages retranslated and rebroadcast in the Ukrainian information sphere. The same goes for the Article 27. We believe that this is one of the articles that beefs up the status of the state language. According to the Constitution, it also protects the rights of the Ukrainian citizens to receive services in the Ukrainian language. I would like to call on all the media outlets and pay attention to every information that we put on the site of the State Language Protection Commissioner. Recently, we have put out an information on the law and the way the high officials, local officials, central officials live up to this law. Every citizen of Ukraine is bound to be in good command of the Ukrainian language. Every official that is providing information about this war or the emergency situation response, a response to catastrophes, if they provide information, including the information from the front, must be done in the Ukrainian language according to the law. We have defined so far the 25 top officials who have violated the law, and they are spreading such information not in Ukrainian language in different outlets. We have also seen information, and we ask all the colleagues, the owners of the internet resources, to translate such appeals and information into the Ukrainian language. Let me stress that it is not banned during your meetings with the foreigners to use the non-state language. But once this information is broadcast through the official outlets, it must be done in the Ukrainian language. All the information to the effect that the notice of suspicion will be served to all those top officials are not true. I respect the Ukrainian president. He communicates with the whole world. He is the guarantor of the Ukrainian constitution. And of course, he will accept and visit the parade of victory after the war. As for the law, it will touch upon the sphere of user's interface. In simple words, this is all the information on your devices, equipment, household devices, and other devices. So we are talking about the specifics of use of some functions. And such functions are met when we take advantage of all the household utilities, washers, or other devices must be provided. The information about them must be provided in Ukrainian. All producers of such goods all over the world have gone to use the state language in all the countries. I believe that this is the result of our robust work of my office and all the concerned citizens who have signaled and provided information to us. As the result of such work, we've been communicating with the world-known manufacturers, including automobiles and so on. Let me emphasize that Article 27 does not concern not only household utilities. In the first place, it reflects on the work of the local governance body, etc. Beginning tomorrow, all the internet resources must have their basis page in the Ukrainian language when they reproduce information about important information. It has to do with all the sites, self-governance, local bodies, all the departments of the communal ownership, mass media outlets registered in Ukraine, and also the facilities that are registered here in Ukraine. All the information must be in the Ukrainian language. Apart from the website in the Ukrainian language, they can put out versions in different languages. But the page in the Ukrainian language must contain no less information than information in other languages for the Ukrainian citizenry. It also relates to the international institutions, manufacturers that have their offices in Ukraine. In the same vein, they must contain the same amount of information, no less than in the original language. I also emphasize that this norm of legislation does not expand to the internet representatives here in Ukraine that are published exclusively in Crimean Tatar language and other languages of the peoples of Ukraine in English. So since the 16th of July, all the subject registered in Ukraine by default must have the Ukrainian language page. As it used to be, and it is now, there are some exceptional cases when the basis pages were not printed in Ukrainian, was not in Ukrainian, and the people communicated not in the state language. We hope this information will be very useful. It will beef up the status of the Ukrainian language as the state language. This is a very sensitive area. The majority of Ukrainian people have the access to the internet. They take advantage of the internet services. They have different applications and are assessing the situation here about the current state of affairs in Ukraine in the first place in the Ukrainian language. I would also like to state that businesses have been informed about that. Tomorrow we will celebrate the third year of this legislation. My state language protection office is working for 2 years now, and we have been conducting, are conducting, and will be conducting the process of use of the Ukrainian language. As for the businesses, we continue meeting in different formats, whether within Ukraine or abroad. We are actively talking to our foreign partners, and a major part of foreign companies are translating movies into Ukrainian, and I pay my respect to such institutions. They translate their sites and they promote the translation of the manuals into Ukrainian of their produce. No less important is the part of the legislation on securing the use of the Ukrainian language, the state one, as it pertains to the law and the code of administrative breaches of law, meaning that in the future, and I will talk about the procedure later on, it provides for the penalties and sanctions in a way of warning and fines. These are relating to the final and transition regulations. That means that the state commissioner will be empowered to impose fines on those officials, heads of the manufacturers of all the possible ownership forms. This will be imposed on all those who breach the law. The representatives of the commissioner, unfortunately, we don't have them in every region of Ukraine, although we recommended that. The representatives of the commissioner will be empowered to set up administrative protocols leading to my measure. As a commissioner, I will pass a warning or fines. The volume of fine, according to the Code of Ukraine on administrative felonies, from 200 to 400 on minimal wages before taxes. As for the sphere of book printing, education, science, scholarship, websites, and the general information sphere, technical and project information, advertisement, sports, telecommunication, transportation, according to the Articles 24, 26, 31, and 36, such fines can be in the range from 200 to 300 minimal wages before taxes. I will also talk about the things. For example, in case of failure to carry out such regulations by officials, when my representatives are breaching the norms, and we have not come down to the fines yet, because our recommendations have been carried out, it seems, at the level of 100%. The fines can also be imposed. Let me reiterate that since the 16th of July, if we see the breach of the law by the same subject who has been warned or who has been imposed a fine, there can be a possibility to impose a second warning or a fine. In such a case, a fine will be increased from 400 to 500 minimal wages before taxes. In other areas, from 200 to 300 fold. All the novelties that will come effective on the 16th of July are well known. They are well accessed. The law on the language has been 3 years old, and everyone should be very serious about carrying out these commitments to the right of the Ukrainian people to receive information in the Ukrainian language and experience the real protection from the government institutions to any Ukrainian person. Thank you, and I am ready to answer all your questions. Will you tell us the oversight and bringing to account that power has been given only to the commissioner or to other officers? Bringing to account in terms of warning or fines when people fail to carry out the law is the remit exclusively of the commissioner of the state language protection. But there are some other issues that I am not in position to inform you publicly. We know that the volume of work will grow. Hopefully, your workload will not increase dramatically, but it looks as if you are going to see major challenges. The Secretariat of the Commissioner and the Commissioner himself was not appointed not only for the sake of the office itself. The aim is to secure the use of the Ukrainian language. As the result of the state oversight, we see that in the majority of cases, every appeal by the Ukrainian citizens sees a 100% carrying out in looking into the presumed breaches. Since the 24th of February, the concept of the place of the Ukrainian language in the Ukrainian society has dramatically grown. We are operating only with the results of the social surveys. We look into the different public opinion monitoring processes. For example, the majority of state officials, people that relate to the local self-government bodies, in their majority use Ukrainian. This is a key concept. Another key concept, looking at the information that we have received in the last 6 months, relate to the breaches in the consumer interfaces. We have about 900 appeals. In their majority have been responded, and the law provides the term of the response to make sure that the information is provided in the Ukrainian language. As for the exceptional cases when indeed it comes down to fines, and I reiterate, this is not a simple procedure. It will be used in Ukraine for the first time, but it has a very clear regulation, including state regulatory bodies. Warnings, it must be officially presented. We should know all the data about such people or establishments. We are also thinking about the informational campaign. If we see the principal refusal to not to carry out such laws, the fines will be imposed. These fines can be appealed in the procedural court procedures. We want the law to be lived up to. The system must guarantee this safe work, safety net for all the people. In their majority, Ukrainian citizens have defined the Ukrainian language as the official language and language of communication. Languages prevailing in all or almost in all the areas in telecommunication, and we are witnessing that in our program that we see on television. Plus, the local government officials use Ukrainians. That is to say, we almost don't see any real breaches of the linguistic legislation. I turn to those who until recently, either on television or elsewhere in public domain, were not using Ukrainian. I appeal on them, especially on official events, to use Ukrainian. This is our linguistic front. Will you explain to us the way that the officials will be speaking in Russian, for example, will you be churning out fines every day? Let me tell you that fines is a reputational image laws. We've been talking about that for a long time. We were saying that if a socially responsible business allows itself to breach the rights of the citizens, and this is to mean that they will deprive themselves of engaging the greater number of users to their trademark, etc. The same goes for the state officials who, according to law, must provide information and services, explanations, and to communicate in the state language. If such procedures are broken, it means that this will be subjected to warnings or fines. That does not necessarily mean that there will be such officials. The law provides that there is such a possibility, but I don't believe that high officials will be ready to systematically breach such legislation. I don't see any reason for this. According to the law, I am empowered to turn to those who have appointed such officials to look into the situation, study it, and to respond to the breaches of this legislation. Recently, you published a list of the heads of the military administrations who are using not Ukrainian language. Is this to be read as a warning if they continue and persist in their use of the Russian language? I mentioned that at the very start, but I will reiterate. There is a systemic, planned and surprise events of the television, book printing, other areas where we are empowered to make research and to publish. This is done according to the law and to special articles on the law of the State Language Protection Commissioner. It is no secret for the Ukrainian society that recently the level of Ukrainian among top officials have increased. It does not mean that we are seeing a 100% carrying out of the law. This war is also against the Ukrainian language. We have enough powers to additionally communicate with such officials. We have also additional toolkit to respond as efficiently as possible to every sign of breach of the Ukrainian legislation. But the procedure of imposing fines is not a fast-track procedure. It starts with the warning, certain documentation. We have to look into the materials, photographs, and other registered documents. When we are talking about official statements by the officials broadcast through some television channels, according to the Articles 23 and 26 that have been enacted, they are bound to translate all the messages in not in state language into the state language. How such people will be brought to account? What is the procedure of warning? We are constantly talking about that. I am open to such communication. Not only am I a commissioner, I am also a scholar. I am a Ukrainian language and literature teacher, and I have announced it publicly. If people find it difficult to master Ukrainian, I personally am ready to help with that study. But let me also remind you that there are local programs of mastering Ukrainian in different regions is available. We have initiated the broadening work of the courses of Ukrainian language. I may be mistaken, but I think there are 200 such courses in dozens of regions. Everyone is welcome to join them. Yesterday in Kyiv, in the bookstore Syeva, we launched a talking club in the city of Kyiv we saw people joining in. They were excited and very interested in work of those clubs. I think we have seen the second wave of the implementation of the project on Ukrainization of the Kyivans and the guests of the capital city. So we are leading the way here. Hopefully, in all the oblast regions where there are no active hostilities, such local programs will be approved targeting the sphere of education. The next academic year starts on the 1st of September. We have seen the results of the surveys, and we have published and talked about them a week ago here in this office, and we were emphasizing the fact about the use of the Ukrainian language. People, their parents, pupils, and students want to be provided education in Ukrainian. We are talking about that local leaders, territorial communities, and believe that this process will be successful in rooting the Ukrainian language throughout Ukraine. Hopefully that since tomorrow your workload will not be increased, no Ukrainians will be speaking. Thank you. We've been talking to Taras Kremin, the State Language Protection Commissioner. Friends, stay with us, and glory to Ukraine.